Yeah.
Hold on. There we go. Thank you for bringing that up. No. Well, that's good. Liv just hopped in, so this is actually a good time for us to start. So that's
So we're
perfect.
starting over a little bit there.
Yeah, that's fine. Welcome to episode 4 of the Starbright Podcast. Today's episode is all about DOMs and different types of DOMs. Before we begin, a little bit of housekeeping. There will be no episode 5 on August the 4th. I will not be here. This time next week, I will be sitting around a campfire having a drink, and I will be there for 2 weeks. So if you want to stop by Penzic in Pennsylvania, Slippery Rock, Pennsylvania, in between Newcastle and Butler, if you want to, join the parties and go to the events and head to some munches and meet some great kinksters and some other things and see all the fun stuff to see at Penzic. Anyone who wants to come is welcome to join. It's a great time. So the next episode, episode 5, will actually be on August. I can't ever remember that date. I think it's the 18th, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, the 18th. August the 18th will be episode 5. So do not be looking for a new episode in 2 weeks. And then lastly, another thank you to Star for hosting this podcast on her Discord where we record it. If you ever want to chat to us live, please join the Discord. There is a link in the description below. So please click on that. And that's really the chat we pay the most attention to. So if you want to converse with us and add things to what we're talking about, that is a good place to do it. Now, today's episode 4, is all about different types of DOMs, and it's a very long list. If we went over every single one, there's a lot of little niche categories in kink, a lot of little things, and you can technically call yourself a kind of DOM in every single one, and there's a lot of different terms to go over. So we're not going to do every single one, only because we could be here for several hours just discussing all the different kinds of niche categories of DOMs and stuff.
Oh yeah, there's so
instead,
many.
Yeah, so instead we're just going to go over some of the more general important ones that you see. And I made a list. I hope maybe you guys have some to throw in here that I might miss that are really important, or maybe you guys made your own list to go over. But we'll jump right into it. And the first one, the biggest one, one of the biggest ones, is probably your daddy and mommy DOMs, which are related to the DDLG and mommy dom little boy. Again, that acronym's too hard for me. I can't make that work for my brain. But this is usually in relation to any kind of little or brat is usually going to be paired up to this, but it's not required. Obviously, anyone that fulfills like a parental kind of role, any kind of parental kind of figure, anyone who's handing down discipline as if they would fulfill that role.
I would argue that daddy kink does not necessarily even mean there has to be a parental role there. Sometimes people just like to call their dom daddy.
Yes. Yep. And you can. I mean, technically, here's the thing. I really, labels are just shit in general. None of these are going to directly apply fully to anyone. Everyone's going to have nuance. But like to me personally, you can call me anything. To me, what I'm being called is entirely different from the role I'm fulfilling. Someone wants to call me daddy, but like we only do pet play. I'm fine with that. I don't give a shit. So really, you could call anyone daddy and they're going to be your daddy dom, if you're calling them daddy.
Yes.
But in the terms of the kink community, usually if someone says they're a daddy dom, they are specifically referring to taking care of someone. They're a caregiver for a little or they're a parental figure in some manner. And that's usually what that fulfills generally. I'd say that's probably one of the biggest examples of a type of dom.
I would
alongside
even say that not all daddy doms necessarily fall under the caregiver circle. I think a lot of them do, but I think a lot of the daddy doms that I've heard of, they just like being called daddy. That's just what they're into. But I would also say that a lot of the daddy doms that are out there probably don't even want to be called daddy. So that's something that we should specify, that there are daddy doms who would prefer to use another title.
Oh, that's 100% true. I mean, like I said, I really, some people are very beholden to like, oh, I'm calling you daddy, so you have to fulfill these, this certain niche. You have to be doing these things. I've always felt that's exactly the opposite. It doesn't really matter what you're calling the other person. Because all this stuff blends together. You can draw lines, but lines like what practical purpose is there a lot unless we're talking sociologically, just so we know what we're talking about. Like in actual practice, which
There's
is
a
why
lot
I
of
don't like labels.
flexibility with any of these titles.
Exactly. But I would say Daddy and Mommy Doms are probably one of the more common types, alongside the next one I was going to mention, which is probably Masters and Mistresses, which is another big part of the kink scene. So Masters and Mistresses is going to be the dominant in a relationship that is primarily concerning generally power exchange in some way. You'll see this in a lot of total power exchange relationships. You'll see someone label themselves a master or a mistress. You'll see this in a lot of discipline kind of situations. Maybe it's mostly about bondage. Well, that falls under power exchange in a way as well. But I'd say a slaving. That's the popular kink. So if someone wants to be used as a slave, usually you'll be owned, and you have a master or a mistress owning you. So that's part of that as well.
You seem to see a lot of master mistress titles in hard doming. Anytime that there's more of a hard dom dynamic, you see a lot of people who prefer to be addressed as master and mistress.
I'd say it's also partially generational too, because I see master and mistress a lot with some older kinksters where I feel like partly that like daddy and mommy doms are like in vogue now. I don't know, it's a popular thing now, where it didn't actually used to be 20 years ago as much as it is now. And I feel like people, even if you're acting as a master, you're probably going to be called daddy and probably going to be considered a daddy dom more than a master or mistress. I think those terms, because those terms have connotations to them that people can have problems with, understandably so.
Yes.
And so some people don't like them, and they have kind of more been phased out to a degree, but they are still really popular. Again, along with daddy, mommy, dom. So master, mistress, also a big part of the scene. Then the third on the list, which Mouse I'm sure will appreciate. Of course, you've got your brat tamers, which is a whole section.
Bold of you to think I appreciate that.
Well, you have to. If you're not bratting, if you're not bratting for someone, what's the point? It's like
I'm doing it because it's fun.
She likes chaos.
What
yes, but if there wasn't a brat tamer to be playing that off of, you'd just be bratting to yourself.
No, I brat equally. It is equal opportunity. Catch these hands. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, but if someone isn't a brat tamer, they just turn around and walk away. Okay, that's no fun. You've lost your fun right there. You need someone who's going to struggle with you, which is going to be a brat tamer.
That's fair, but I would also say that brat tamer is a bit of a misnomer too, because the entire concept of brat taming is you're not trying to tame a brat. It's like trying to tame a lion. You're not actually a lion tamer. You're just doing your best not to get your ass kicked.
You're a lion keeper. Yeah, brat keeper would probably be a better way to put it. Yeah.
I've always found the tame brat tamer kind of funny. It really gives the image of fighting a lion.
I have heard that exact argument made against like zookeepers before and circuses that use lions, that, there's no such thing as like a lion tamer because they're still a wild animal. You can't really tame them. You're really just a keeper. I've heard that exact argument before. Funnily enough.
Yeah, exactly.
So then probably because I'm kind of going in. Well, these top four, the fourth one I'm about to mention, are probably in kind of popularity listing because the next one is going to be your rigger, which is also known as a rope top. It's going to be the person who ties the other person up generally. This doesn't have to be the dom. Doesn't have to be, but it usually is. It's usually dominant.
We actually talked a lot about riggers and rope bunnies the last one.
We did. Which is a great
episode. And I would also like to point out that all of these can be mixed and matched. There's many brat tamers who are also riggers, and all of these can be mixed and matched in any combination. Seen some really interesting ones out there.
Yes, indeed.
Brat tamers who are riggers are definitely a problem for me.
I could see why.
Yeah.
You can't cause chaos if you can't move.
Exactly,
it's a problem.
You just have to make sure they can't gag you, so that you can, try and make fun of them the entire time.
That's the good old uh-oh face that you would give.
Yeah, it's the oh no, run.
Oh no, indeed.
And then we can go more into depth into each one of these later too. But there's a couple more that I want to mention. There's FinDoms, which are financial dominance. And this is a weird. Most people who've probably heard of
It,
financial domination have probably only
it
heard of it
is.
because they've watched like Euphoria. Because there's an excellent example of financial domination in Euphoria. If you've ever seen the TV show, great stuff. Really
Like,
love the
a
writing
lot of
for
the
that.
findoms I've met are not even into the sexual component, and I would argue that
No,
a lot of them may or may not even be true doms. They just know how to bully people online to give money.
Well, here's the thing, because I would argue to a degree, a financial dominant, it doesn't even have to be about taking money from someone.
It's true.
In fact, in many cases, you probably shouldn't be taking money from the other person. Financial
Exactly.
domination, in a healthy way, it's usually just about control. So one person,
Mhm.
the submissive, is giving up control over the finances to their financial dom, and their financial dom controls their money. And now that hopefully doesn't mean stealing it or taking it any way that negatively impacts the person you're doing this for, because that would make it unhealthy and you're just stealing. You're not like healthily doming them whatsoever. But usually what this happens to be is that you're going to save their money for them. You're going to give them an allowance if they're being good. You're gonna oh, you did your chores this week, here's your allowance for the that kind of thing. You're
Mhm.
controlling their money. And you're right, it doesn't have to have anything to do with sex whatsoever.
Yeah.
And in fact, a
I
lot of
would
financial
argue that in
domination
some
relationships don't.
degrees, they don't even have to be the dominant. They may be more switch leading or sub leading. A lot of the findoms that I have met, especially the femdoms that I've met, I don't think that they actually act as dominants in their everyday interactions with any partners they might have. I think that a lot of times findoms may be specifically online. I don't think I've actually met a findom that really seems to be a true dominant.
Well, it is very famously well known to be a long distance relationship kind of thing.
Hmm.
I mean, I'm sure you could. I mean, I don't want to call anyone a gold digger because that's not a polite term, but I'm sure those
There
relationships
are
where you might have
parallels
in your
that
head,
can
oh,
be
they're gold digger,
drawn.
that yeah, you could argue that maybe there's
Hmm.
there's an aspect of that there. But I most of the findom relationships I've seen have been online. I don't know a
Hmm.
lot about financial domination other than, obviously if it's done in a healthy way, then all the more for you. But that involves someone shouldn't be stealing from the other person, that kind of stuff. But I know it's a thing,
Oh
so
yeah,
it's on the list.
I've known
Then
several findoms. And I find it very interesting because most of them that I know are not very dominant.
Yeah, Fendom is kind of like a dark area for me. I'm
Hmm.
not super familiar with it because like it's I myself, I'm not a submissive and I also don't identify as a Fendom, so
Yeah.
the
never.
but yeah, I've
So
never
yeah, I don't. It's just a really niche thing, I think, because I mean,
Hmm.
generally in a healthy relationship, both people are living their own lives, and unless someone is like being a stay-at-home parent, both people are going to have their own jobs and their own finances. And like money is such a oddly unique thing to humans, I guess would be a way to put it. That it's just weird to have the idea of like, oh, let me just give you all my money and you're going to control my, like, I want to go back to being 10 years old, not in regards to anything else in my life, but just with my money. I want to go back to being 10 years old just with my money. It's a little niche.
Hmm.
uh so then, going down to the next one on my list, we have owners. Now, owner is usually a term that is very specifically, well, sometimes there's crossover with masters and mistresses. Owners usually specifically refer to people that are involved in pet play, which is a big category in and of itself here. So if you like being called puppy, if you like wearing dog ears, or maybe putting a tail in, or any kind of animal ears, I've seen there's pony play. That's a whole thing.
Hmm. It's a
Then
whole thing.
there's a My Strange Addiction episode all about pony play that was really interesting.
Hmm.
But yeah, then maybe you're in a relationship with an owner. You have someone who owns you, and they're going to essentially, this is the animal version of I guess DDLG and mommy dom kind of degree, if you get where I'm going with that parallel.
There's definitely parallels there. Many people who are into pet play are also somewhat into DDLG.
Yep. Very common overlap. We have our kind of related to that, kind of not related to that. We have our primal doms. So primal is a very niche thing as well. Primalism. That's usually like really rough sex, animalistic, not animals. Distinction there, but animalistic is a big thing.
Yes.
Scratching, biting, hair pulling, like all kinds of like think. We went back to caveman kind of times, you know.
Yes.
And so usually if you're into that
There's
kind
a
of
lot
thing,
of growling involved.
yes, absolutely.
Hmm.
And maybe, you know, you try and keep it 24/7 and you kind of have this open kind of use kind of thing with primalism at home. Maybe you have triggers for it where, you know, someone like scratches the other person, then it starts it, whatever. It's an interesting little niche, but that's another dom type there. Now, there's one more type I haven't mentioned, and I know Drow here identifies as this, and will probably be very happy. I have not mentioned it for a reason, so maybe we'll get into that. But we have our service doms. Now, service.
No. Sorry, go on.
No.
Nope.
Say what
Sorry,
you
go on. Nope. You were in the middle of
Okay.
talking, my friend.
Well, I was so I have a weird. There's service doms and then there's pleasure doms, and I actually don't really think there is such a thing as a service dom. A pleasure dom, yes, absolutely. I'm a bit of one myself.
Oh, absolutely. Same here.
Oh,
Pleasure
yeah.
doms are a very specific type that usually tends to run into sadism.
Yes,
it does.
Which is another one that I was going to bring up. I wanted to do this one first because so in how I have heard it described to me a couple times by different people, and correct me if I'm wrong, a service dom is specifically, I guess. So if you ever heard the term topping from the bottom, which is like a submissive who like feels like they need to tell the dom what they need to be doing, kind of thing. It's kind of sometimes considered a rude thing in the kink scene, and sometimes if you have a dom that is like inexperienced, who doesn't really know what they're doing, sometimes the submissive has to say something. That's fine. So a service dom is considered kind of the opposite of that. It's botting from the top, and essentially a service dom is all about focusing on their partner in a way to service them, whatever their needs are. And there's an argument to be made that that's not really being dominant because you only care about them. But the reason why I have a problem with the definition of service top is because a lot of the things that are considered like for a service top, it's just like common sense, paying attention and pleasing your partner. I've heard just like negotiating and heeding safe words and negotiating like
I would argue it's the bare minimum.
Yeah, like that's everybody. If you're going to use like the very basic definition of like respecting the person and trying to provide for them in play what they want, that's how everyone should be. And like even if you're doing something that's like, oh, like free use where I'm just supposed to use you, that's because you're asking me to do that. You know, you want me to do that. I'm still adhering to what you want. If you're just ignoring all of the stuff that usually people consider like a service dom, which is stuff like heeding safe words and stuff like that, and just paying attention to your partner, you're not really doming them, you're abusing them. And that's fucked up.
Yeah.
Which is why I prefer pleasure dom. Pleasure dom is a real thing.
Yep.
Getting off on pleasuring your partner.
Yep. And usually pleasure doms, we tend to keep going and going and going and going until they can't take it anymore.
Exactly. Yep. And here's the other thing about pleasure doms too, which is why, and the reason why I think that definition is way better than a service dom, is it's not just about providing pleasure. Yes, it's about that. I want to provide pleasure, but it can also be about controlling that pleasure. Orgasm denial is part of being a pleasure dom. All right.
Exactly.
Forced orgasms, part of being a pleasure dom. So it's a large part of that, and that is very distinct from just being a service dom, which is just supposed to be adhering to the rules of normal BDSM.
Yeah.
So, but
pleasure doms are I was gonna say pleasure doms are a whole different ball game for submissives. Most don't know what they're in for.
No, pleasure doms are terrifying. That is a legitimate thing.
I feel like
weaponized orgasms. That's what that is.
1000%. But that's how I feel like every dom should be if you're being a good dom to some degree, because in the end, it's about providing. I have this. I don't know if I've mentioned in these episodes. I have this great stand-up routine that I'm working on. Maybe I'll do it one day. I'd like to get on stage and tell it, but all about how a good, healthy way to look at sex and sexual relationships, and why people are bad at sex and how people can get better. And I compare it to cooking. Okay, and I think I did mention this in one episode, but this is the whole thing. Yeah,
I think it was the first episode and last episode.
Yeah, I think it was.
This is the whole thing, because that's part of it. You're making a meal for them, they're making a meal for you, and hopefully you have a meal that you both can agree on to have as a dessert together. But if you're not providing that meal for them, what are you doing there? You're supposed to be giving them pleasure. That's the whole point. If you're not giving them pleasure, you're doing it wrong. You're probably bad at what you're doing. So in my mind, everyone has to be at least a little bit of a pleasure dom. You have to as a dom. You can't not be.
Yeah.
It's the whole point. Like, literally, what are you doing there otherwise? But there is,
exactly.
I do agree that there is a distinction between, someone who specifically can call themselves a pleasure dom, like myself and Drow do, or just like anyone else who's like in the scene generally, because, I said, there is specific, like, orgasm denial is not something every dom is into, or orgasm control at all. Like, that's not every dom is into that. So there is a distinction there between people who's willing to edge someone for 3 days and someone who's not. And then, we can. There are sadist doms. You can just call them sadists. And this is another type. This is just people who like to cause pain, I guess is the easiest definition.
Not necessarily even pain. It's kind of like some degree of torture.
Yes.
Not necessarily even bad torture. It's just, there's definitely a torture element there.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be. I don't mean like just physical pain. I mean just like something. You want something, and they're gonna hold it away. They like watching you squirm. They're gonna hold it away from you. They're not gonna let you get it. And usually they're very heavily into impact play and stuff like that. A lot of doms that if you like being slapped around or spanked really heavily and stuff like that, then you need a sadist generally to do that. And it's also, we mentioned this, I think, in another episode regarding aftercare and stuff like that. Doms need aftercare as well. And sadism is a big part of BDSM. But everyone involved in a scene, whether it's the dom or the sub, needs to be aware that aftercare is for everybody. And just because someone likes slapping someone around in the sack doesn't mean that they need to be told, hey, I'm happy you did that. Thank you for doing that afterwards. I've known people that would be willing to do that in a scene and then feel like shit afterwards for what they did.
Exactly.
Themselves, not even the person they were doing it to, but themselves for doing it. So that's a very serious aspect of kink. But that's another one. Then I'm going to say maybe the last one that's on my list here that makes sense, that maybe deserves its own mention here. There are leather doms, which are another very niche, very specific thing here. This kind of is more into the leather subculture of BDSM. I would maybe, which is a lot more.
I don't see a whole lot of leather doms around.
No.
Usually there's crossover with some other element, and I don't see very many who would actually identify themselves specifically as a leather dom.
I've seen it a bunch, actually. Well, it was different because I lived in New York for a while, and in New York there's a huge motorcycle scene, and there's a lot of leather doms in the motorcycle scene. So I happen to have met a lot of them in my time, and you'll see a lot of leather doms at events like that. It's also very big in a lot of the LGBT crowd as well. For some
I've
reason,
never met anyone who specifically identifies as a leather dom. I've met leather doms, just never one who that was how they introduced themselves.
It's a thing. I don't know. Maybe it's because it's specifically where I lived that I can see that as large enough to put on this list. But I mean, here's the thing, because this is the reason why this was the last one on my list is because there's so many different little niche categories. Like there's feeders, which is if
Hmm.
anyone here has ever heard of feederism, which is
Yeah,
a
I'm
very
familiar.
yeah, and if anyone listening is not, feederism is a very specific kink where people get off on essentially eating, being like stuffed full, and
Hmm.
the feeder is the person, the dom, who's going to be feeding the other person, participating, giving them food, forcing them to eat, that
It's
kind of
a
thing.
pretty controversial one.
It is. But I'm just saying, there's technically a lot we could get into bulls and breeders, and but there's
Hmm.
we could go all day. Like I said, there's just so many different kinds.
Yeah.
But those are like the major ones, I think. Anyone else have any examples to bring up that I may have missed or skipped over?
You did bring up the bulls and breeders. That was probably the only other one that I thought like was really worth mentioning, because that's another one that usually isn't a standalone. Usually it is
It
mixed
goes with
matched with
yeah.
some other class. But most
Yep.
of these are mixed and matched. Usually you don't see it's I have not met very many DOMs who only identify by one of these roles.
Yeah, I identify as multiple, but pleasure dom is like the primary one.
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't really have a like, because like I said, I'm pretty down to fill most any role as
Yeah,
long as it's something I'm
same
comfortable
here.
with. So
Exactly
Hmm.
yeah,
same.
and
I'm very
yeah, because
In the
so
same
like
way
yeah.
that brats very seldom just say I'm a brat, in DOMs
Mhm.
there's usually multiple roles that they fill, and they usually have a very specific title, like primal service dom or primal pleasure dom, more specifically. I've met a lot of those. um, Brat tamers who are also riggers, brat riggers. You usually see crossover.
Mhm.
Oh yeah,
Usually
for
they
sure.
at least identify it's two different elements when they introduce you.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I mean that's part of why none of these labels are absolute, and there's all of this is blurred lines, and it all
Hmm.
means different things to different people, and yeah. So I mean, to me, though I can call myself a control dom, which isn't, I didn't even mention, not even technically on this list. I guess the closest would be a master or a mistress, but I don't
Yeah, rules.
I've
Mhm.
the whole slave thing is like, I've done it, but it's not really. I'm not specifically into that. I'm into the power exchange. I like power exchange. So any one of these
Hmm.
categories, I'm good with participating in, as
Mhm.
long as I have that control, as long as I can use that control. So I could call myself a control dom, which isn't even on this list. If you want to make up your own type of dom, as long as someone can like understand what you mean,
Hmm.
you can call yourself whatever the goddamn hell you want.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely.
Hmm.
Mhm. But yeah, so there's just so much to this though, uh, so much we could go over. Uh, 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 it's
There is
ridiculous.
so much to it.
And at some point we should probably do. At some point, I know we have plans for the next 2 episodes, but at some point we should probably go over the
Hmm.
different variations of subs, which a lot of them
Yes.
connect to
yes.
the
Mhm.
ones we just
Yes.
talked about here.
Yeah,
Um,
generally speaking, every type of dom and sub has a counterpart with a name that matches.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yes, indeed. And which is really what these are balanced off of, which is why, like,
Hmm.
when we mentioned like daddy and mommy doms with, daddy doms little girls or mommy doms little girls and stuff like that, because that's usually the category that's into. They have either littles or whatnot that they're taking care of,
Hmm.
or someone
Mhm.
else like that, or a brat to take care of,
Yeah.
or like a
Uh,
master or a mistress might
even
have a
just
slave.
even just a sub who prefers caregivers. You don't necessarily have to be a little or a brat to want a caregiver.
That's right. That's
There's
actually,
just
that's a very good
so
point.
much variation to it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's something we haven't even mentioned too. Yeah, you don't even have to be in one of these categories or one of these opposites to like participate in a scene with someone who is. It's
Hmm.
entirely
Mhm.
unnecessary. You
There's
you
also experimentalists that we didn't discuss,
oh yeah.
which
Yes.
is the type who just wants to try new things.
Mm.
That can also kind of go in with sub as well, because like
Hmm.
there are
Subs
it's
can be
kind
as
of both.
experimentalists as well.
Yeah,
Hmm.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, I feel like that's also, a lot of people are, especially experimentalists, when they're first getting into the kink scene.
Yeah.
Because
Yes.
if you're coming at it with an open mind, I know a lot of people who have not been big into it, and then will be like, well, I might as well try. I don't know what I like, I don't know what I don't like.
Yep.
Let's
Yep,
see.
that's
Let's
how
find
you
out.
that's
Yep.
that's how you find kinks you didn't know you were into.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Or the stuff that you never want to try again. Holy shit.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's like
Yeah.
That's
kombucha
how you
girl
learn
meme, where
limits.
it's like the kombucha girl meme. Oh, you see a new kink, it's like, nah.
Scroll
Well,
back to make sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe, now that I think about it, maybe. It's a solid maybe.
Let me check that again. Yeah.
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 Nice.
You
What
see
do
it
you
come up on your
think
feed
that's
3 or 4 times, and suddenly you're like, why am I more and more attracted to this? I hate this.
Yeah.
Every time. That's how new
Yeah.
kinks are unlocked.
Yeah.
I grimace the first time I see it on my timeline, and by the third, I'm like, I'd try it, but I hate myself for it.
Yeah. Literally.
Yep. Yeah.
Uh,
I've seen some things.
Same.
yep.
One thing I could say about being a kink admin is I have seen some things that in the community I never came across, but wow, there's some creative kink admin out there.
Yeah, that's for
There
sure.
is.
Yeah.
Like especially those of us that are also writers. It's
Yeah.
beautiful. It's beautiful
Yeah.
works of
We
art.
get some good concepts written there that are just like, okay, I've not seen that before, but not against it.
Now,
Alrighty
you're
then.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
I
I'm not.
myself I tend to write
I
stories
would
and stuff.
argue
So
Yeah.
that
I'm
if
not.
you aren't an experimentalist in the scene, you're probably just being closed-minded.
Like, I'm not a
Mhm.
furry, but I've written furry smut before. So
exactly.
yeah.
Right.
I used to find furries so cringe, but the more I'm around, the more I'm like, you know what? I'm not here to kink shame.
They're really
I'm
not
not
that
really into the mascot thing. Mascots creep me out, and I think that was my whole thing about it. I don't like
Right.
big suits. It creeps me out. I have
I-
no idea why.
I'm gonna be honest. That the suits put me off more than anything else.
Yeah.
Because I can't. I already sweat during sex. I can't
Yeah.
Oh my
imagine.
god.
I can't imagine.
The swamp ass. I
Yeah,
don't want to
dude.
think about that. Imagine the dry
Nope.
cleaning bill on a fursuit.
And
my
speaking
gosh.
about bills, the cost of a good fursuit, dude.
Yes.
Has anyone ever
It's-
told you?
You have
Holy
to
shit.
think
It's
about
like-
how much money furries
You have
have
to mortgage
have
your
to
house.
be in that life. You know,
Yeah.
It's like-
like the
Oh.
fact
Yeah,
that you
you're-
have 3 different fursuits, you could sell those 3 fursuits and have enough to buy your own home without a mortgage.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Fursuits
Yeah.
are really expensive. I have
It's
friends that are,
absurd to me how expensive they are.
and most
mean,
of them
I
make it themselves now.
I would argue that I'm not an experimentalist anymore, only because I've been in the scene long enough that I kind of know. I mean, I would still try.
I've been in the
certain
scene longer
things.
than you, and I'm still just like, I would still consider myself an experimentalist because there is things that I haven't tried because I cannot in good faith say I've tried everything. There's always something new out there.
No. Well, yes. But here's the thing. I've been around. Well, because I go to a lot of events too, a lot of crazy events. And so, like, there isn't a lot that I haven't tried that I have any interest in trying. There's some stuff, but there's not a lot. And I would argue that part of being an experimentalist, because it's one thing to call yourself an experimentalist, but I think part of being an experimentalist is that you actually like are going out and seeking and trying to do new things. I'm not really. If one of those things I haven't done yet pops up, sure. But I'm not looking because I've done so much that it's this.
Yeah.
I don't call myself that anymore. At one point I was.
fair.
I would argue that I've gotten to where I am in the scene only because I was an experimentalist, I would say.
Yeah.
There was a point that I was not in the scene whatsoever when I was young. I didn't really get into the scene until 20, 21, 22, somewhere around there. I was pretty vanilla before that to a degree. So like, and I was very specifically not in the scene. So like, I've been around, and the entire time too. I like the event that I'm going to next week. A lot of crazy shit happens there, and I've been going there since I was 13. So I just have.
I would never say that I was ever actually vanilla. I definitely pretended I was vanilla in some of the relationships I was in because I just did not trust that partner to do anything BDSM related. which in retrospect should have been a red flag, but like,
Yes.
you know, young and dumb. Anyway, yeah, young and dumb. But I was never really vanilla, and I was always kind of in the scene, but I certainly didn't learn a lot about it until I made the concerted effort to do so.
Yeah.
So I've definitely had learning curves at different stages. My initial learning curve was pretty young, and then I had to go through experimentalist phases.
Yeah.
And then I'd kind of even out and find like whatever speed I was going to go at for the next couple of years, and then I'd learn new stuff again.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that you should continue doing for the entirety of the time you're in kink, because there's always going to be something you haven't heard of. But as long as I've been in this community, there's always something that has surprised me that I hadn't heard of or hadn't thought of, hadn't even thought about trying.
Yeah.
So I'm always open to hearing and doing new things or doing new things.
I think part of my problem is that my approach to kink is very much like my approach to like food. I'll try new food if it's something I've heard of and I already thought looked interesting, or someone I really know and trust.
Okay.
Is like, this is really good. You should try it.
Because you also want to make sure that you've done the research and make sure that it's something you feel safe with. That makes sense.
But if I'm like at a diner and it's like my friend's like, oh, order this, quail burger. And then, but there's also omelets on the menu. Unless like I saw someone make this ridiculous quail burger online and I was like, oh, I've seen someone do things with quail burgers. Ooh, that's interesting. No. Typically, I'll just order a fucking omelet because I've had the omelet. I know what to expect with the omelet. I'm not going to be disappointed by the omelet. I know what I'm getting. And I don't with the quail burger. So like my approach to kink is like the same way. If it's something I'm interested in, already know about, have done research, and it sounds fun, I'll do it. Otherwise, I'll just stick with the things that I know what's going to meet my expectations because I know what to expect.
That's fair. Sometimes you just want to do what's comfortable, and that's totally fair. There's definitely been things that have been brought up to me that I'm like, you know what, that does not sound like something I'm into, and I'm not going to do that.
No, 100%.
Like, generally speaking, I'm pretty open-minded, but if that sounds like something that sounds deeply unpleasant to me, it's still going to be a no.
Yep. And actually, since you brought it up, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier, which is you pretending to be vanilla just because you didn't trust someone that you're with to be any kind of. So I that's an interesting topic, and one that we've mentioned, I think, before in kind of passing, in that don't do anything with any of this with someone that you can't trust. Nothing.
Yes.
Nothing kink related.
Sorry, I was just saying, like, that's very much how it was for me too, is because like I feel like I've been in this community for a really long time, but like I've had so many bad experiences and stuff that I just never really felt comfortable to get into the actual community. But then when I met my current partner, it just kind of like, before we had our child, it was a lot easier to especially because we did have that, a lot of that caregiver portion of our relationship, because especially because I just had so much going on, and he like literally was like, because of my mental health and stuff, like he was very much like that caretaker and stuff, and I always knew that I was very submissive, but it just, like I said, I never felt comfortable enough. But like because we were friends beforehand and everything like that, it made it a lot easier to slip into the dynamic with him, because I always kind of felt that way towards him and everything like that. And it was, but yeah, no, like which is weird because I've always been a person that, didn't really take signs and kind of jumps into stuff. But for some reason, like with this, I was like, this is just something that I just don't really like. I've kind of played around with it and stuff, but like this is the first time that I've really actually like jumped into the community with somebody. It was like, actually, like, this is something that I want, you know what I mean? And it's just, yeah, so it's really interesting for me. But
I think
I think experimentalist phases have to come during a period where you feel very comfortable.
Yeah.
Whether that be with a partner or with yourself.
Yeah, and like him and I are so comfortable. Like I see things. I mean, he honestly like I mean, he like looks at my page with me and stuff like that, but like I'm constantly like so comfortable, if there's like something that I want to try or if there's something that, needs to change, like I'm just so comfortable being like talking to him about that and like communicating that with him.
Right.
So it's really, really nice to have that because, it's just, it's, it's really comforting
See,
when it's like, kind of something that I've always wanted.
I would argue that I think that's a lot more common than people think, and I think
Mm-hmm.
probably
It
a
is.
lot of people's primary holdup in engaging in any kind of scene is the fact that they just either don't trust their current partner or don't have a current partner to do it with,
Yeah.
and they just don't know how to do any of that without a partner and without someone
Well,
that they can
exactly.
trust.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Not everyone's comfortable going out and just meeting new partners just to explore something they're not sure they're going to like. So you kind of have to
Exactly.
be
Yeah.
comfortable with yourself enough to find a partner you feel comfortable enough with to
Yeah.
try these things. And a
Yeah.
lot of people who are not comfortable in their own skin or comfortable enough to go to, a munch just to see if they're into it,
Yeah.
aren't going to have a chance to experiment until they do
Yeah.
either find a partner, whether it be a short fling or somebody who's very well seasoned in the community already,
Yeah.
who takes them under their wing, whether it be a relationship or otherwise.
Yeah.
It's really hard to get into a community without that level of trust and an extreme amount of
Yeah.
comfort.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which is as it should be, because it doesn't matter what kind of dom or what kind of sub the person is, whether they're a daddy or a brat or a brat tamer or whatnot.
Yeah.
Like all of these relationships have a very certain again, they're not all exact, and labels don't really mean anything, but they all have like a certain set of
Mhm.
of rules and standards that the people that are engaging in these kinks generally try and follow, right? And we talked about
Yeah.
that in the first episode. And it doesn't matter what kind of relationship you're going for. This is all rife for abuse. And it's
Exactly.
all, and in a very dangerous way. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe some to a more literal physical degree than others,
Yes.
like with a bad
I
sadist
think
or a bad rigger.
I think that
Mhm.
there is a lot more danger in the nature of something with total power exchange than there would be. And that is also more dangerous for certain groups of people. So younger, less experienced people are
Yeah.
far more at risk of
Yeah.
danger from somebody who's practicing TPE.
Yeah.
But
And
even
people
totally
who
vanilla
are
relationships can be,
exactly.
unhealthy.
Yeah.
Oh, they're absolutely, but we tend to take everything to the extremes in our
Exactly.
practices. So as much as we can worry about extremes, every vanilla woman's had an experience where a partner has hurt them sexually in some way. If
Mhm.
you're with somebody who's a sadist who doesn't know limits, that can be much worse. There is always a bigger risk associated with what we do because we take everything to the extremes.
Yeah.
Not all of us are as extreme as others, but we are on the more extreme spectrum by the fact that we are involved in this community.
Yeah, so don't be like, oh, it's a pleasure dom, so what can go wrong there? And be like, oh, they're not gonna abuse my boundaries or anything. No, they 100% could. But I mean,
Absolutely
here's the
can.
thing. I have a weird thing with that, because I wouldn't trust someone if I couldn't trust someone in like a kink relationship to trust boundaries. I wouldn't be able to trust them in a vanilla relationship either.
Exactly.
Like,
Well,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Now that I'm older, I have learned my lesson. I was with a guy in particular, one that I was with for a very long time, that I knew that he was into kink. I told him I wasn't because I wasn't sure I trusted him to
Mm.
explore that lifestyle with me. And I just told him I was vanilla and just never broached the subject again. He didn't push it, but I'm glad I didn't, because knowing more about him after, we dated for a few years, I'm pretty glad I didn't put myself in a situation where he could have hurt me, because I feel like he probably would have.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it was probably a good thing that I didn't trust him too, because in retrospect, I wouldn't have trusted him at all at this stage of my life.
Yeah.
But I was young and dumb.
Yeah, I mean, we all were at some point.
Hmm
Back when the dinosaurs
Yeah.
ruled the earth.
Yeah.
Honestly,
of
yeah,
us.
back when we all wore bumpets and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
The fact that those are coming back in style is going to be the end of me.
Wait, what?
Bump it.
boy.
Bane of my
no.
existence. I hated those things so much.
Yeah.
No, what do you mean? It's time to break out your low-rise jeans again. That's apparently finally coming back too.
Because that's what I want at all times, to have super feminine plumber's crack.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
It's okay.
absolutely. Nothing
So
wrong with
much
that.
fun.
We all know.
So
We all know at some point they're gonna start bringing back the trip pants and stuff too.
Oh,
They're
girl, I
already
love trip
around
pants.
to a degree. They never left that much.
But you
I mean,
don't
they're
see them as often.
Oh, that's my favorite pants at Pennsic. I have big puffy pantaloon pants. I mean, they have ties to the bottom, so they're not fully trip pants, but they're the most comfortable pants I own. I fucking love that shit. That's good stuff.
Right.
That's the best.
I've never owned
puffy
trip
pants,
pants because
man.
I am convinced that they would be the reason that I died. I would get stuck on something and it would be game over.
yeah.
I'm
You
too
probably
clumsy
fall.
for life wearing leggings. Yeah,
Yeah.
guys, I walked around with a hole in the ass of my leggings all day yesterday. And I
Oof.
knew it was there. I just had to pretend that, it wasn't, so nobody said anything to me. If I can do that, do you really think I have any fucking business in trip pants? I put a hole in my leggings before I even left home. I'm not going to survive trip pants. I will actually die.
No, you could be right. And then there is
probably
one. There is one type of dom that I have not mentioned. It's a term thrown around a lot. I've left it to the very end of this episode for a reason. I'm interested to see what you guys think. I know people have mixed feelings on this, but then there's also the fake doms, which is a term I see thrown around a lot.
Yeah, fake doms.
and-
There's also fake subs, and we have to acknowledge that both of these classes
Yes.
exist.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And-
I have mixed feelings on the term fake dom because
Yeah. So
I mean, I
basically, the
mentioned-
big thing you have to know is that when we say fake dom, we don't mean that they're actually a fake anything. They're usually just really, really shitty at being doms, and they're doing something that is harmful or abusive. Sometimes it's even just new doms who don't really know what to do, and they're trying to be dominant, but doing so in a very dangerous and toxic way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, I mean, they're not inherently bad, but they have mountains of red flags that you really have to learn to watch out for.
That's the right definition of that term. I have, unfortunately, so I've mentioned many times that I don't like a lot of these labels because they're all very blurry and they're really just a good for sociological, this is what this means, but not really great for actually defining anything specific. Because I have seen people called a fake dom because they didn't fit a submissive's idea of what that type of dominant should be. So I have seen that term applied in ways that it really shouldn't be. If you want like a daddy dom or mommy dom and they don't fulfill your idea of what that is, that doesn't necessarily mean they're a fake dom. If they only care about their own needs and they're abusing the relationship, then they're a fake dom. And maybe not in malice, like Mouse just said. Maybe they just don't know. Maybe they're just not good at it. But just because they're not your idea of that doesn't mean they're a fake dom. I know people that don't like that term whatsoever because people will just throw that around liberally. Oh, fake dom this, fake sub that.
I will be honest, a lot of the time that I see somebody saying, oh, you girls, you're just calling them a fake dom, usually I consider that a red flag too.
Yep.
As soon as I hear somebody going, oh, you're just going to call them a fake dom and, cancel them, I'm just like, oh, God. So what's wrong with you that you've been called a fake dom so much that you have this much of an issue with it?
Yeah.
Holy shit.
I don't mind the normal definition of it, but I have seen it because if you're in enough kink groups, community groups, especially, you see people post silly things, especially when they're anonymous. And then sometimes it's really, really, really silly. And it's really just, they're using the term really just to hurt the other person. I've seen that multiple terms and that bothers me.
Yeah, I think that there is a very large potential for abuse for both dom and subs being called fake. I think what we need to be very leery of is labeling a dom fake just because they did something wrong one time, or they said something out of pocket. A lot of us are neurodivergent. We say out of pocket things all the time that we don't necessarily understand. I think that when you have to look at possibly labeling something a fake dom, it's usually abusive, like blatantly, maliciously abusive behavior. I even avoid trying to use the term fake dom when we're dealing with somebody who's clearly very new to the scene and may not know that what they just did was taboo
Right.
or wrong. I will label somebody a fake dom if they're doing something that is blatantly malicious. Like I've told you about that dom that interacted with me who believed that I was barely 18 and was trying to bring me into a TPE scenario the day he started speaking to me.
Mm-hmm.
I would consider that a fake dom. That is somebody who is malevolent. They are dangerous and they are harmful. They are doing something they have to know is counterintuitive to the kink community. Therefore, they would be a fake dom.
I agree 100%.
Somebody who's being just outside of what you would expect for a dom, or somebody who is obviously just very naive, I would not label them a fake dom. I would label them somebody who has a lot to learn and has some red flags to iron out.
Right.
But,
which isn't,
it
yeah,
happens.
everyone starts somewhere.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of potential to be mislabeled, but I think that it is an important label to recognize because we have this label because there are people who are very dangerous.
Well, really, instead of so the people that are doing it maliciously and knowingly, even with experience in the scene, I don't even like to use the term fake dom only because I have seen it used wrong. I just call them abusers,
They're
which
predators.
is what they are. Yeah,
Predators,
exactly.
abusers,
Predators. Yeah, 100%.
Mm-hmm. I think we also have to acknowledge that there are fake subs too. There are subs who are very self-seeking. There are subs who don't know what they're doing. A lot of times fake subs don't necessarily mean to harm the dominants they're talking to, but they're engaging in behaviors that lead to abuse or lead to ambiguity that could lead to accusations of abuse. So I think that we talk a lot about fake doms. We really don't talk about fake subs very much, but you can be problematic enough to be called fake no matter what your role in BDSM is.
Right.
100%. I think you were going to say something, Drew.
No, I was gonna say also another thing I think both sides should be aware of is the vetting period. That's actually extremely important, especially with talking about dynamics and such pretty early on. Because if you don't like a vetting period, then there's a problem.
I think that there's a lot of confusion of what actually constitutes vetting too. I don't think we actually teach newer subs and doms how to do vetting. And I think that is a problem that we need to be very well aware of. Yeah, it's not like you're just going through Tinder and talking to them to see if you're going to be okay for a first date.
No, it's usually like months or, it's quite a long period of time of just talking and kind of like getting to know them on a more personal level, opposed to just talking on Tinder and talking for like 5-10 minutes and then wanting to smash.
Yeah, looking for any surprises, I like to put it, is really
exactly.
Yeah. Because sometimes you'll be speaking to somebody for a month and you'll be horrified by what they say after the 2-month period.
Yep.
Exactly.
Like, wow, those red flags were being carefully hidden.
Yep.
Yeah. Vetting is super important on all aspects. Even like that's actually what job interviewers do actually. Essentially they're vetting you so that way they can see if you'd be a good fit for said job that you applied to. That's actually a good example. But yeah, no, I've had partners that I didn't vet properly, and it was bad.
Yeah. Vetting is so important. And once you get to the point where you're pretty sure that you're compatible, then you also have to talk about what you're both into. Whether or not they're going to be able to respect your limits, whether or not that, you even can be compatible sexually or kink wise, because you may find out after speaking to somebody that your kinks just don't align. You may like that person just fine. That doesn't mean you're going to be able to both enjoy the same thing. If somebody's biggest thing is, a kink that you can't stand, it probably won't work.
And that's rough, but don't come into it like there's something wrong with that. I hope no one listens
exactly.
To that. It just is. You have a disagreement on your expectation towards life, specifically in the bedroom, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, one person that I spoke to for a while, really liked this person, really nice. after speaking to them for a month, they told me that their biggest thing was water play. And I was like, water sports are not really my thing. And I don't think I can get past that. That is their biggest kink. And I was like, nope, can't do it. Not for me.
See, like,
That's fair.
yeah,
Nothing wrong
like,
with that.
and I know that's the best part about the kink community. Like, you'll go like conventions and stuff, and people like try to show you like essentially like all you have to say is not my kink, and for the most part they're actually super respectful about it. They'll actually say okay and back off.
Well, it's only fair.
The amount of times people have tried to convert me to their kink after I've said no is way too damn high.
Oh no, I meant like not like no, I'm talking about like at conventions and like big events. Typically they're very respectful because I mean that's good etiquette. Plus you're around a lot of people, so if like you're showing all the red flags, there's gonna be not one but like groups of like tens and stuff just pointing you out, and that's not pleasant.
Yeah. Peer pressure works. It's very effective.
Exactly.
Sometimes.
It makes you behave sometimes.
That's true.
Oh yeah, but yeah, I don't know. I think we've
I think we nailed most of it. Yeah,
we covered
I
quite a
think we
bit.
nailed
Anything
a lot.
important on this topic that we're missing?
We
Any major
even got into
categories or-
trip pants. We've covered everything we possibly could.
Okay. Was the next episode TPE or CNC? I can't remember which way around we were going to do.
We were talking about CNC and then TPE after.
Okay, so August 18th, same place, same time. We will be discussing CNC, which I think everyone is probably excited for. It's something we're all into, I think, in this channel. So, yeah.
I think we are. Liv, is that yours too?
Yeah.
I think
Okay.
that was the only one I
Then
don't
yeah.
There's
necessarily know.
multiple people that wanted CNC done.
Oh yeah.
I think we can actually kind of put free use and CNC within the same episode.
Free use is part of CNC. It is in the same family.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other one that you wanted to
you're
talk about. The other one that Will wanted to talk about was power exchange.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
which
you're
we'll
right.
do,
That's
which we'll do the episode
usually
after that. Which CNC also plays into power exchange a lot as well. So
power exchange comes into almost every kink. So it is ubiquitous.
And it's the one that I'm big about. So yeah, so I think it'll be good to lead off with CNC and then go into that TPE on the episode after that. So that makes sense to me. So then August the 18th will be the episode on CNC. I hope to see you guys there. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Once again, the link to the Discord if you wish to chat at us and converse and add to the discussion is in the description below. Please come join. Also help support Star because it is her Discord, Starlight and Friends, that we are using to record this on. And just come chat and hang out. Lots of stuff going on the server. Lots of cool stuff. Lots of cool people. We'll have fun.
Always fun.
Yeah, and then we'll see you guys in a month, August 18th. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.